Hello everyone, I'm Caden Ellertson, and this is the final reflection for the creation of the Dirtbag Discovery. I hope you enjoy. Okay, so if you didn't know, this podcast was an assignment or my final project for my radio and podcasting class at RDP. And the final part of the assignment is to do a reflection. And I thought I'd share it on Spotify so that you guys could listen and learn from this beautiful experience that I had creating this podcast. The first question, the reflection assignment, is now that it's over, what are your first thoughts about this overall project? What resources did you find most helpful? And what challenges did you face, and how did you overcome them? My first thoughts revolved around the idea of going from a consumer to a producer. I now have a wild amount of respect for podcast hosts, editors, and producers, and completely understand why big podcasts have teams behind the scenes making the final products. The overall time that went into a single 1-hour episode, which includes planning, recording, learning, and editing, exceeds 20 plus hours. And although I understand that future episodes will take much less effort and time, the initial learning curve is quite steep. And I'm so grateful for my professor, Dr. Trish Campbell, for the course and the resources provided. And I would say that the most valuable resource that I used every single day was the book called NPR's Podcast Startup Guide. So if you're looking to start your own podcast, I definitely recommend going to the store and picking it up. I think it was like $20, but very worth it. My second thoughts are based on my course content and learning about the interiority of sound and the history of oral mediums. Having a deeper understanding of why oral mediums are so popular and the role they play in the development of community gave me motivation when times got tough, and I would recommend educating yourself on these topics before starting your own podcasts. Now I'll segue into the challenges I faced. The biggest challenge was having an appropriate environment for recording. I used a soundproof studio for my recordings, and it was still picking up background noise. I don't know if you guys could tell, but after editing the podcast for 12 hours, I just could not bear that noise any longer. So I hope it wasn't too obvious. And it's also hard setting up a MacBook with two microphones for an interview. So we had to use a singular snow globe microphone, which was a bit of a challenge. One thing I would do if I had more money was, and if you had more money and you knew that you were going to continue with podcast creation, I would definitely invest and look into a better mic setup than what I was using, because that's what I'm going to do for future episodes. The second question is, what were your goals for your podcasts? Did your goals change as you worked on it? Did you meet your goals? And what did you like best about doing it? The goal for my podcast was to create content for my community about my community. My hopes is that this content will last forever. The only way that could change is if Spotify makes you pay to keep your episodes on. I'm crossing my fingers that doesn't happen. But this goal stayed consistent throughout my entire podcasting process, and I hope that the community enjoys the podcasts. I'll do my best to continue it through the next few years while I'm at school. And at the end of the day, the best part of creating this podcast has been all of the support you guys are showing me. It makes this work so rewarding, so thank you. The last question is, what is the most important thing you'll take away from this process? And what's one thing you'd wish you'd done differently? Is there a next step for your podcast? The next step for the Dirtbag Discovery is to pump out as many episodes as I can while I'm still super stoked on this project. I also want to learn how to create better audio files and get better at editing. One thing that I wish I would have done differently is sat way closer to the microphone while I was recording. But again, these are all things that you just learn along the way. Throughout this podcast journey, I was reading a book by my favorite author and researcher, Brené Brown, called Daring Greatly. The premise of the book challenges social norms around seeing vulnerability as weakness. Rather, it explores the role of vulnerability in taking courageous and authentic action in one's life. The book perfectly encapsulates my biggest takeaway from this podcasting process and is built upon Teddy Roosevelt's Man in the Arena speech, which says, "It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming. But who does actually strive to do the deeds? Who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat." The creation of this podcast has helped me be grateful for the uncomfortable and vulnerable process of trying something new. It forced me to wrestle with my perfection until I realized that I'd never even get started if I didn't let it go. Letting go of my perfection offered myself the opportunity to develop a healthy relationship with my fear of failing. In the never enough culture that we live in, I struggle to find confidence to chase my dreams, which may sound crazy from an outside perspective, considering I'm constantly chasing the things that I love and doing my best to do them wholeheartedly and authentically. But this process has never come naturally for me and often takes consistent work and practice for me to get started. Creating this podcast was one of the first times in my life where my fear of not being enough completely stepped away, and my self-worthiness and compassion allowed me to see the process of stepping into the arena underprepared and underexperienced is where growth truly happens.